start working with your seats, please. All right, we're getting ready to get started. Gather around. All right. Go get them. Where are they all at?
Can you give me a sign for us to wrap up? Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Sergeant Kyle Burns from the Texas Military Department. A little bit of background on me. We're going to talk about social media, and I'm on the full-time side. I'm the social media manager here on Camp Mabry. But with me today, I've got two social media experts. They've got some great insight on exactly what it takes to run social media and some challenges that they face. So we're going to talk about that today and how that's relevant to you and what you do in your day-to-day. So can we go ahead and get a quick bio on you and who you are and what you do?
Sure. So hi everyone, my name is Jordan Fetter. I am a guardsman over at the 149th Fighter Wing, Staff Sergeant, and then I also am on an MPA tour with AFWorks as the social media manager for all of AFWorks, as well as the marketing manager for the Austin Hub, so right downtown over here. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now, and then I've been in for about 5 years, and I've been the social media manager at a couple other units and bases. So.
Staff Sergeant Will Rainier. I'm currently the Chief of Communications at Army Futures Command. Previously, before this, worked at 10th Special Forces Group and then the 82nd Airborne Division. At 10th Group, we launched the social media platform, so there was no social media at all when I got there. At the 82nd, I managed all of their accounts for about 4 years, including during deployment to Iraq.
Awesome. So one thing that we're going to talk about, and this definition is going to vary, I think, by person, but what does social media mean to you?
So the biggest thing to think about when you look at social media, you have your owned media, so which would be like your newspaper, your earned media, so like what they talked about in the last panel, getting someone to come cover you. Social media is really shared. So if we think about it, we don't own it, we have to co-opt it with our community. So social media really has to be a conversation. If you're treating it like a bulletin board where you're just going and hanging your stuff and then checking in a couple days later, you're kind of missing the point, because this is your opportunity to really connect with your audience, the people who care enough about you to follow your page and to like and engage with your content. You really owe it to them to really continue that conversation. So this shared media concept where you have to bring in your community and give them an opportunity to interact and engage, it's a back and forth.
So similar to what Will was saying, was that it is really kind of a community tool, and it is just one tool among everything else that we have in our pockets. But it's a really useful one if you want to build your community, share really valuable information for people. You're not just shouting at them and trying to get them to grasp the information. It's really about building that audience and getting them to really value what you're talking about. And
So basically, if I understood that right, is to make sure that social media is actually social.
Yeah.
So
Correct.
I think it's like crazy tempting to especially when you work in it, to forget that. So thank you. All right, so government organizations have a very unique challenge in that we can't compete on the level of other companies and whatnot with what we call paid content. All of ours is organic, which means we aren't paying a single dime to get our content out there. How do you address that problem? Because it's breaking through all that noise is quite challenging. What do you do?
So for me, it really goes back to just adding value to your audience, and for a lot of bases and installations, that's making sure that they have or they know about the opportunities that are happening on base. One thing that I always go back to is working with all the people who produce the content, whether it be photographers or videographers, and you really want to like highlight the people who are doing the work. I find it's really valuable to take photos of as many people as possible and get people to tag themselves in photos, or basically want to be a part of that conversation. You don't want to make it all about just the mission. You want to develop the people and include them too. So that's a big piece for me. It's just making it about the people and not so much about just we did this thing and it happened and we're done. It's okay, this person contributed this, and you share it among their communities because they want to share it too. They want people to know what they're working on. So
Yeah, I think when you look at paid content versus organic content, it's really important to understand how Facebook works. So when most of us, I'm sure, have our own accounts and we like, 100 different pages and we have 100 different friends and family, that time that you're spending on your news feed is only finite. And so Facebook can only put a finite amount of content in front of your eyes, literally. And so Facebook has to try to figure out what content is going to be the most important to you, and then weigh that against how their business model is, where when people are paying for that placement, they have to prioritize that over something that you actually want to see. And so when we're not paying for content, now it puts the onus on us as public affairs to ensure that the content we're putting out there is actually engaging and something that people care about. And so when you look at the type of content that you can put out on Facebook, there really is a hierarchy. So live video would be number one, so things that are happening right now and important. Pre-produced video is number two. And you're looking at photos and then links and then text. So text is, I cannot overstate this, outside of like emergency updates, so crisis communications, text updates are like below the bottom. If you're just hanging text up on your wall, it's just, it's going to get scrolled right past. You have to give somebody a reason to stop scrolling through their phone and stop and look at what you're posting. And then another thing I would add to that is, understand who your community is. So like I said, social media is a conversation with people that care about you, have a vested interest in you, and you should have a vested interest in them. And so once you build your community, then when you post something, if you have your core key public, the people who really you want to reach, your content that goes out, if you're focusing on the right key public, they will stop and look. So focusing more on your audience, because they're going to stop and look at your content first.
yeah, and then also another thing, in addition to audience, is just knowing the platform that you're using, because each of them have different algorithms and different ways to really connect with your audience. So while Facebook, you might want to tag a bunch of different pages that will share the content. Instagram, you might want to tag people too, but it might be more about using the right hashtags and getting on the correct people's feeds so that they like your content or come to your page and follow you, essentially. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
I found the best way to do that too is, say, for example, if we'll just use a purely made-up example. If the governor's page posts about your unit because he happened to be at one of your events. Go on there as the unit and comment on that post. Hey, for more content, come over and check out our page. So finding out who those, finding that network. Again, back to audience analysis. Who are the people you want to reach? Where are they already at? And how do I go there and bring them back to my page?
So I have a quick little story about that, just so I can give an example. So one thing just the other day with AFWorks is one thing we're trying to reach. We're trying to reach airmen, and that's something that a lot of people may not know what AFWorks is. And we're trying to make sure that they can find our page and our content and get involved. So when people, where there are different bases posting things, they might tag us. And there's just the other day somebody posted something about innovation. There was a picture of some guy wearing a flamingo shirt, and one of their audience members posted, "Can we talk about this flamingo shirt?" And I just went in there and responded as AFWorks was like, "How can we not talk about the flamingo shirt?" And it was like I got a few people clicking on who we were, found out, and ended up liking our page. So it was like you get involved as a conversation.
Fantastic. You touched on something a little bit. We were talking about knowing the platform, and it seems like from a social media management side of things, it's just there's new features being added all the time. Like, what do you do to stay ahead, or what do you do to like find out what the new features are?
So I usually I follow a lot of people who that's kind of what they do for a living on YouTube or other locations where they're staying up to date on the new options for each of the platforms. And then one thing I do personally is on my personal platforms, the ones that are more private and like where there's not a lot of risk involved, I'll try out like Instagram stories when they first came out, or test it and see different ways to use it before I actually go and apply it to an Air Force platform. So that's one of the main ways I practice.
Yeah, actually, my wife taught me how to use Instagram. I was like not a believer at first. That was probably 4 years ago, and I was just like, this, like, I don't care about pictures. Like, this Instagram is for people who can't read. And so, but she was like, no, like, you really need to see this. And when I started seeing the engagement she was getting on, when we would go out or, when we would travel and just seeing the engagement she got, I'm like, oh, okay, slowly started to kind of believe in it. But yeah, definitely it's hard to keep a finger on like what the new trends are for any other reason besides time management, right? Like our time that we have is only, so much, especially if you're only doing it two days out of the month. You don't really have a lot of time to try new things and see how it works. So definitely using your personal platforms just to check out a new feature and see, think through how does this, how could I take this and apply it with what I do.
I know one struggle that I think we have is that we feel the need to populate every new social media platform as it pops up. What are y'all's opinion on that?
Yeah, do less better. So I honestly, if I could delete our Facebook page, I would. I would, because I feel like too many people are using it as a bulletin board and not using it to create meaningful engagements. If I could just do Twitter, I would just do Twitter right now, and that's just me personally, because I feel like that is what would work for my organization. So you really have to understand, where are your people at, and what works for your organization. What are your goals that you're trying to achieve? If you want to have a place where you can push, video content, Facebook is probably a good option. But if you want to have more of a dialogue with your community, I feel like Twitter is more better suited for stuff like that. So, yes?
Very interesting question on that. The demographics of some of the people that we're trying to reach aren't Twitter people. They're not Facebook people. Why are you falling into, I won't say trap, but why are you falling into that one single area when the demographics of the people that we're really trying to get interested in what we're doing are on the different platforms?
Yeah, sure. So, again, it goes back to what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? And so when you look at, your specific organization and you do your audience analysis and figure out who is it that we want to engage with, for me at Army Futures Command, we are trying to have a high policy or a policy level discussion on modernization. Where are those people at? We found that as we post things on Facebook, over half the comments are, God bless our troops, like, I love the USA, thumbs up emoji. And it's like, okay, well, we're not having the meaningful engagements that we want. So that's why I say Facebook as an example for my organization. Whereas when I want to have a national policy level discussion, I'm looking at journalists and scholars and think tanks, and those are the ones that are on Twitter and having, posting about that I can then go and find those discussions that are already happening and insert from my point of view as Army Futures Command, saying, hey, here's why that's important, here's what we're doing about it. And And so that just helps us achieve what I feel like are our communication objectives. So if you're trying to go and find people to come and join the Guard, if you're using it kind of as a recruitment tool, then yeah, Facebook is definitely a great tool to show like, hey, here's what a weekend drill looks like. You can do this. Or if you're trying to recruit for a civilian workforce, you don't have to wear the uniform to serve your country, to serve your state. And so, they're just looking at what the platform provides and what you're trying to achieve, and then figuring out the best way to marry those two together.
I would say the average National Guard unit, Facebook would probably be the best tool. It's basically, that's our newsletter. And if you ever have a commander that tries to get you to do a paper newsletter, tell them no. And I'll be more than happy to tell them why. But I think the newsletter approach, hey, because you might not get them on that story, you might get their attention on the next story, especially if you're deployed. But they can go back and say, all right, what is the 36th Infantry Division been doing? It's our new newsletter for the average person.
And the reason I wanted to bring it up, and I love the fact that you say, what was it, do less more?
Do less better. Yeah.
Do less better. And the reason for that is because I think the temptation for us is, a lot of times, is that you will have, a senior leader or someone come into you and say, I want to start this. And sometimes it's because they may have heard of another person doing it really, really well, or they think that they're not having the reach that they want to. But I really want to, and you hit it on the head, which is where you don't necessarily, if that's not your target audience, if you have a very strategic goal, so Twitter makes a lot of sense for him. For the brigade, which we're going to talk about in a later session, it's probably going to be Facebook, because that's where the families and the communities and the soldiers and the airmen are, down at the unit level. So again, it's doing that audience analysis and then making sure that you're effective and that you're doing the right thing. Especially, and I'm glad that he said that, because one thing that we struggle with in the Guard is we have a very small amount of time. We need to make sure in that amount of time we're getting the biggest bang for our buck, and I think he hit on that. And then Jordan, did you want to say anything about that?
Kind of the same thing. It's just you really have to know your audience, and that goes for any organization, and it can vary from unit to unit, from company to company. And I know just from AFWERX, one of our biggest assets is LinkedIn, and I'd never used that for any military organization before, but because we know our audience is largely, at least on LinkedIn, it's Air Force leadership and companies who are looking for opportunities to do business with the Air Force or other organizations. We know that's a really valuable platform, but that's not going to be the best platform for like any Guard unit out there necessarily. It might be, but it would just be determining who your audience is. So that's really, really the most important thing.
Thank you so much. So what is one obstacle that you've faced in social media, and how did you overcome it?
So generally speaking, with social media, I think one thing I've run into a lot is that a lot of people, because they are on social media themselves, they everybody thinks they knows how it works, I guess. So you'll get a lot of people coming in and just, hey, post this thing or do this thing on Twitter, and you're like, are you the expert? And so it's kind of like you have to talk to them in a way where it's like, all right, let's figure out what the root of the problem is. Let's go back to problem definition, figure out what your intent is, and then we can talk about what route to take. Because it might not even be social media. Half the time it's sending out an email instead. But everybody kind of jumps on the, let's do social media, because that's just an easy click of a button thing, but it's not going to necessarily make the most impact. So it's just talking through stuff with people who come and talking about it.
So you're saying there's content that can hurt you as much as it can help you?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yep. Yeah, because a lot of people think, okay, you post this thing, it'll go away. But if it's not quality content, people will unfollow you. People will stop paying attention to what you're writing, and it gets boring. And you just got to make sure you're adding value to people's lives. So.
I think we can be really overly risk averse on social media. Like, you have this like crippling fear that your commander's going to call you and say, why is our unit on WTF moments? And it's like, is that really the worst thing in the world that could happen? I mean, sometimes maybe it is. But what I would say is if you err on the side of caution too often, you really limit yourself at like the opportunities that you have to engage. Game of Thrones came back on the air a few weeks ago, and there was a really, really interesting conversation about, who would win between a tank and a dragon. And you have the 1st Armored Division who jumps in and goes, well, actually, our tanks and our crews, we have the best crews, and they give them a run for their money, and that felt organic because they were able to insert themselves, into this conversation that, really they had kind of a lot of commanders would be like, no, we don't want to do that. That's kind of beneath us, or that's not our message. But what you do is you build your community by showing them, hey, we can be personal. Here's how we can take something that's already happening and show how our unit can have value in this.
Can you address I've had this debate with people before, but the style, formal versus informal, social media. I mean, some NCO insisted that we do everything AP style on social media. It was the most dry.
Yeah, so I use it, I use the candy of vegetables analogy, and parents in the room probably will really relate to this. If you feed your audience a little bit of candy and you get them like, oh man, this is a really fun page to follow, and then they come and they follow your page and they interact with your content, so when it's time to give them the vegetables, they're already there, they're at the table. And so, you can dangle the sucker in front of the kid's mouth, and when they open it, you stick the carrot in there. But you really do have to find a way. It's a balance. It really is. And so that's why, one of the things that I tell social media managers is personify your account. Who is your account? If your account was a person standing in front of me, who are they? How old are they? Where did they go to school? What did they major in? What bars did they drink at? What music? What's the last concert they went to? And really understand who that is. You may be the stodgy old, introverted professor, and that's fine. If you're going to be that person, own it as a thought leader. Or you might be, the green-haired kid down on 6th Street. And if that's who your personification is, great. When I ran the 80 Seconds Twitter page, we were the grad student who would kick your ass in a bar fight. That is who we were. And so, we thought we were smarter than you, we thought we were better than you, and so when we interacted, we would get into beefs all the time with the 101st, and it got kind of brutal at times, and I would get my hand slapped, and you learn your left and right limits, but you personify your account so that people can relate to you and they want to be a part of your community.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip that I think a lot of people could use. I haven't done too much of that with the personified thing, but I think it's really important because then you know what your voice is and it's consistent, because you may have multiple people running the platforms too, and as long as everybody has that in mind, then you're going to have that consistent voice. Because I know right now at AFWorks, I'm the only one running social media, so it's pretty consistent just because it's me, but yeah, as soon as you get other people involved or you get people helping produce content, then yeah, it's really good to have that consistency. So.
Well, you just touched on something I kind of wanted to lead into. So you're the only one. What does that look like? Do you have a content calendar? How do you stay organized? What do you do?
So at AFWorks we use Google Suite, which is really, really useful. And so I do most of my scheduling out on Google Calendar, and that's really useful. I just have different codes that I do, and I send invites to whoever reviews social media so that at any moment he can just pick up his phone and just make sure there's no typos. So that's generally speaking how I schedule content. I don't produce all the content because we have a few other marketing managers in AFWorks in Vegas and then in DC who they produce different stories and videos for our platforms. But a lot of our content is usually curated from across the Air Force, because one of the things that we've been doing with AFWorks social media is we kind of want to be the central hub for innovation in the Air Force when we can be. So we'll highlight different things airmen are doing across the Air Force with cost savings or time savings, and so we share that on our pages, as well as opportunities to get involved with AFWorks, whether it be through small business innovation research contracts or challenges that we put out that people can respond to. So we do kind of like that candy and vegetable thing where you give some stuff where people are super pumped about whatever airmen are doing, and then you're like, but here's how we can help you, but also you can help us. And so we kind of slide that over to them too. So yeah, I spend a lot of my time just looking on divots or wherever else to see what's out there, what all the other PAs are producing, because it's really some good stuff.
Yeah, I think with as much as we kind of talk about like personalizing, having fun, also remember that your social media platforms have to serve a purpose. So you have to operationalize it. And so, whatever that is with your commands, objectives, so, lines of effort or whatever, typically it's something along the lines of win today, win tomorrow, build ready and resilient soldiers. And so you have your 3 lines of effort. And so making sure that your content, you can tie everything back to what your organization is trying to achieve from an operational standpoint. That way when they come and yell at you like, why did you post this? You're like, well, sir, it actually, if you think about it in this context, this is how we win tomorrow by, encouraging people to go out and, shoot dragons with tanks. That's how we talk about what we're doing to win tomorrow. We are, training to go out and fight an enemy that we don't know what they are. And so making sure that you can tie everything back to your operational objectives will really help you just build credibility with your commands so that whenever you do go out on a limb or, kind of step outside of the box a little bit, you have that credibility because you are helping the unit achieve what it's trying to achieve.
Okay, so one thing that you both kind of brought up was content. I want to know what type of content does best for you, where you get it, and then why you think it does so well.
That's really tough. I mean, that's going to be different really for everybody, for every platform. When we built the 10th group's Instagram page, we made a very conscious decision, a very upfront and clear decision. We wanted dynamic imagery and no cut lines. Like no cut lines, period. If you go and look at the 10th Special Forces Group Instagram page, you will never see soldier conducts training. Because we said that's not who we are, and that's not the kind of page we want to be. So you really have to kind of think through just what tells the story of your unit the best, and how do you leverage the inherent strengths of each platform to do that. So Instagram, it's going to be very dynamic imagery where we had some guys riding on, hanging out of the side of the helicopter and said, "This is how we Uber." And so, that works for us because it's kind of that like brash SF kind of cool guy stuff. But for, another unit that could definitely be seen as like, that's not who you are. Like it just wouldn't feel authentic.
Yeah, it's definitely every unit and organization is different. I know for AFWERX specifically, this is for everybody really. It's just trying to have imagery at the very least. Just text doesn't usually work, so that's just a good rule of thumb, either imagery or video. But I know for AFWERX, we do really well with sharing our kind of like our accomplishments or ways that we're improving the Air Force. That's usually what our audience wants to hear is like, okay, so you as an organization was put here and you're supposed to be making the Air Force more innovative. So if we're not sharing how we're making those achievements with some good imagery and then just a quick blurb about a number of contracts we gave out in the week or something like that, then that really connects with our audience. But that's just AFWERX specifically. For another unit, it might be just sharing photos of people during drill because they all want to tag themselves. So it all depends, but imagery is a good rule of thumb in general.
Speaking of achievements, what is your proudest social media achievement? How did you get there?
I'll let you go first. Okay.
During our deployment to Iraq, the Operation Inherent Resolve spokesman, Steve Warren, we were about to walk into a press conference and he hands me his BlackBerry and he goes, "Hey, they put Twitter on here and they told me to do Twitter while I'm here, so just take care of that for me." Like Sergeant E5 Rainier, like saying like, "You what now? You want it? Okay." And so he hands it over to me and we start to build this platform and I start to learn his voice because he's the spokesperson. And so as we're kind of doing this, we start to learn that people like outside of the military really had a vested interest in what he had to say. This was, very early in the war against ISIS and it was still very topical. And so one day we're alerted to the fact that the Russian Ministry of Defense, a verified account, was essentially accusing us for killing civilians in Aleppo. And so, a very like damaging accusation to make, especially when we went back and looked at, got with our strike cell and realized we hadn't dropped any munitions in Aleppo in 6 months. And so it just patently could not be true. So taking in this information and kind of knowing who our voice was and knowing that we kind of had the WASTA, to use an Arabic term, to really combat this, I draft up a few things that essentially says, that's just not true. Here's the data, and we can back this up with evidence, and we release our strike reports. As if you go back 6 months, you'll see that we haven't dropped any munitions in Aleppo, and we really went and engaged with the Russian Ministry of Defense, a verified account, and said, you're wrong. And a lot of people really appreciated the fact that we would take it, what was seen as a credible accusation, and really take it head on. Mm-hmm. and show, this is what you're saying, and it just can't be true. And so we went out. I drafted it all up. He approved it because it was really far outside of the box for what I was thinking. But he said, "Yep, I love it. Let's post it." So we go live with this, and we ended up with a back and forth between the Russian Ministry of Defense. The next morning, an article post to forumpolicy.com, kind of detailing out the whole Twitter exchange. And it's Russia and DC are tweet fighting over who bombed Aleppo. I think it was something along the lines of it. And one little blurb on it is, Colonel Steve Warren, who's actually pretty good at Twitter. And I was like, that's me! This is awesome! So, just kind of getting that validation from somebody who, is very neutral and very outside of it. It was just very rewarding to be okay, this is my niche. I've kind of found where I add value to the organization. And I think anytime you can do that, no matter what your MOS is or what your capacity is, especially for an organization like the National Guard or the State Guard or the Army, it really is fulfilling to just be okay, I feel like I'm fulfilling a purpose that I was sent here for. So that was really cool.
So I don't have any awesome stories like that. My last base, I was at Joint Base Andrews, and so that's home of Air Force One, and our unit pretty much supported that mission most of the time. And so this is kind of a combination of social media and my photography, but I was able to be there for when it was the North Korean detainees, the Americans, I don't know if you guys remember that last year, they returned, and we found out about that. I think we had the news on, and we found out that President Trump was coming to Andrews that night to meet the detainees. So from 11 a.m. we found out that we were going to have to be back at 9 p.m. and we were all rushing. And so I'm also was a social media manager there at the time. And so we all, everyone in my unit, were rushing to get everything ready, and we also had to escort the media out to Air Force One, and so it was absolutely crazy. But I was able to be one of the photographers, and so just getting involved in that dialogue and being able to post our social media page and getting the overwhelming response from people who were just really, really happy. I mean, the Americans were returned, and it was just kind of an incredible, momentous occasion, and being able to be a part of that dialogue on social media and otherwise was really cool. So
that is a better story.
You hit on something that my next question was. What are the hours of a social media manager? And what is
24/7?
24/7. And how do you? We all have personal lives. We've all got other stuff that we want to do. How do you balance that? What does that look like? Do you have any best practices or?
So me, it's just scheduling things out as much as you can. I'm working on developing a better schedule just in my own life. I'm trying to do certain days I plan out social media, and then other days I upload everything to schedule it. So then, because there are different tools like Hootsuite and other platforms that you can use to plan these things out in advance, or just going to Facebook, you can schedule things. So I think doing that, really trying to plan things out and not stress yourself out too much every single day, scheduling things in the morning for the evening. Try to avoid that if you can. Yeah.
And doing that really helps you free up your time so that when there is a cool Dragons versus Tank conversation, you actually have time to be able to engage in those authentic moments. So I know I had an NCOIC in the 82nd who at the time I kind of was really mad about it, but now looking back, I owed my social media calendar for the next month on the 15th of the month prior. And so it was every day, two Facebook posts and a Twitter post, and I had to have it, and it really was that far out. So it's looking at the calendar and seeing what observances are coming up, looking at the training calendar, seeing what's going on, figuring out, what opportunities we have to leverage, National Month of the Military Child, or things like that, and figuring out what the communication objectives are for the next month and what content you have that goes with that. Now there are going to be things that pop up. If somebody does a really cool range or captures a really great photo, you can always plug that in. So definitely leave gaps for that, but definitely the more planning you can do in advance will, you copy and paste and post instead of okay, what are we going to post today? I don't know, go through the archive, and it really just sucks your time every single day. Where if you just dedicate 1 or 2 days a month, you can kind of really get out and get ahead of it, and that frees up your time to live in the moment on social media.
Yeah, I think the reason I'm glad you brought that up is because, again, we only have 1 to 2 days a month, right? So for us, it's about maximizing that time. And I think that's a huge thing, is that if we can get in there and we can schedule out as much as we can doing those observances, that ends up saving you time in the long run. And it actually makes you look better, so thank you. What things on social media, like, it's always changing and we're always trying to predict the future, but do you have anything in the future that you're excited about? Or
Yeah, I really love Instagram stories right now. And I'm really interested because Snapchat recently came out and basically said, hey, Instagram really ripped us off with their stories idea, so we're going to license out our software to all these other companies. So what you're going to see is Snapchat, that story feature is going to be a function on other social media platforms like LinkedIn and a few others. So, but what I'm getting at with these stories is you think about how you plan a broadcast package. You have a beginning, you introduce a character, that character has conflict, the character overcomes conflict, and at the end of the day, everything is good. So you think about this, 1 to 2 minute broadcast package, why not shoot that using an Instagram stories and plan it out the exact same way you would a broadcast package and shoot it in the moment so that as people are going through the stories, they're seeing it like a broadcast package, but you're in this sphere where you're not uploading a 2-minute video. Instead, you have 10 5-second or 15-second clips that really tell the story throughout the entire day. And that does 2 things. It helps you connect in the moment on social, which is great, and it also gets your content out much faster, as opposed to saying, okay, I just spent 6 hours filming, now I need to go back and spend 10 hours editing, and then hopefully we get this approved before drill is over. If not, I gotta wait around and get the right person to bless off on this before we can post it. You do your pre-planning, you understand what the objective is, and then you kind of have that permission to go live and post that content as it is, and you end up with the same product, but you've done it in a way now that is more engaging and feels more real to your audience.
So I think kind of along the lines of that was embracing vertical video and other.
Yes, please embrace it.
And kind of because as we move to a more mobile platform, everything's vertical. It's less likely. Well, people still turn their phones, but it's you see, like on Spotify, they have these vertical music videos now that go along with other things, and it just kind of adds to your range of tools that you can use to really connect with your audience. All goes back to that, and I think it'll be cool to kind of mess around with that, figure out how to get more creative with it, and really reach whatever audience I'm trying to reach.
I think the problem with that is if you're trying to get to the mass media, real media too, you have a choice of going vertical or horizontal. You gotta pick and choose.
So what I would say to that is, again, it goes back to what are you trying to achieve. If you know you're shooting a B-roll package to try to send to a station, definitely shoot it traditionally because that's how it's formatted. However, think about where all your audience, your audience on social is and how they hold their phone. It's like this. It is always like this, and they're always scrolling just like this. And if I'm on Instagram and there's something sideways, I'm just going to skip it. I'm not going to take the time to turn and watch it like this. I'm just not going to do it. And I think that's indicative of kind of the culture now. So if you think about that and you know that you're shooting something for social, if you know that's the output, take your DSLR. I'm serious. Turn it sideways, frame it up, and shoot it vertical. Embrace it. It's happening because that's where people are consuming their media, and that's how they want it.
And to kind of reach back on the previous panel when you were talking about making sure that if you have media interest, like if they say, hey, I can't come to your event, I'm so sorry, I would love to. Kind of take that as a little bit of a clue of, but if I send you the B-roll, might you run it?
Right.
Because then you can prioritize it that way. If you don't get that response back and they're like, hey, no, we're just not interested, turn it sideways and embrace the social, because your audience may care more than the media audience may care. So one thing that we just kind of hit on as social media managers is interactive and engagement, what type of posts do you see that just have more engagement than others? Like for your audience, I know it's going to be different for everyone, but like you brought up a really good thing with tagging for drill weekends. Like that's something that we could probably do here really well. What other stuff do you see?
So I know for my guard unit, it does go a lot back to the people in the photos. It's a community, the guard. I mean, everybody kind of knows everybody, and it's just something where people want to see what we're all working on. But on at least on the AppWorks side, kind of what I was talking about earlier is sharing our achievements, because people are really excited to see what we're working on, especially on LinkedIn. People, the way that algorithm works is everybody, depending on who your connections are, then their connections can see what you're posting. And so if they're commenting their thoughts about something we're working on, then this extended network will see what they're writing about, and that kind of adds to their own personal brand. So there's this whole different community on LinkedIn where you can really utilize these people who are really, really impactful in their own fields. And so I see that a lot, where you share some content that they want to comment on because it reflects well on them. So that's just one example of what I've seen a lot of.
So day one, you're a brand new social media manager. You're just arriving. What do you do? Like this is what I think when I knock out.
So like my very first day I've ever been a social media manager, what did I do?
Or you could do a hypothetical. Like day one, knowing what you know now, what would you do if you're like brand new? You're like, okay, I'm gonna revamp the social media thing.
So I would go back to really communicating with either the PAO or whoever's in charge and find out what the overall communication strategy is. I think that's something I was missing as a brand new social media manager back. I think I was a senior airman when I took over the one at Joint Base Andrews, and pretty much it was just we weren't utilizing it. They were like, oh hey, you can post whatever here, command information is going to give you some photos, and you'll just post it and you'll just review the content. And I was never really sure what the commander's priorities were, what we were trying to achieve. But that goes back to PA as a whole. It's just driving our content and using the right platforms for the right thing. But I would turn it back around and be like, okay, what is the goal here? And then I can tell you what capabilities we have and how to best use them. So kind of flip it that way.
Yeah. And then just like I said earlier, just personify that account. What is the voice? What is the tone? And then how do you use that voice to connect, with the audience that you want? Who is that audience? And so I think when you marry up the objectives, the message you want, with the audience you want to get it to, then you can really start to figure out the best way to deliver that. And if it is, like command information or, putting out videos or articles, great. If you want to have more just in point-to-point engagements, then doing it that way.
Okay, before we take any questions, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about, or do you want to jump into questions?
Do some questions.
Let's do it. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
So I've actually got two questions, so I'm going to go ahead and pose both questions so that I can get them out. The first one is, if someone is trying to quantify their job with the commander, what is the best way? I know there's insights on Facebook. What is the best way to A, quantify your job and what you do on social media to your boss, and B, that's not the second part of the question, and B, using those numbers to get your airmen promoted, to get them recognized. There's got to be another platform other than going into insights and I've reached this many people.
Sure.
I know there's more. And the second question is podcasts. I've not heard anything about podcasts, but I know that middle genre are huge on podcasts right now. Can you speak about that?
We could do an entire panel on podcasts.
Yes.
Really good podcast. That's a great idea. Who's got the AR book? Let's hit the first one. What would you say for quantifying social media with your leaders?
So this is something that I think PA has an issue with overall, at least from all the way back to tech school. It's like you don't really talk about the insights, you don't talk about the numbers. A lot of things I've run into is just, it goes back to people not really understanding social media or what the point of it is. It's just like a microphone to just put your message out there. You write a story, you just post it. And so there's not a lot of, I think, drive from the beginning. I think if we go back and focus on what our objectives are from just the communication standpoint, and then we're able to, let's say there's a big event happening, or I don't know, commander's call, everyone has to be there, but something big like that where you're trying to get everybody to go out, and you determine what kind of content you're going to produce, whether it's story, a video, whatever else, and then you're able to create a call to action through your social media campaign or whatever you're developing. Then you can go into the insights and determine how many people clicked your link, how many people signed up, who ended up at your website to do whatever you ultimately wanted them to do. I think that would be ideal. I don't see that happening very easily. It's a lot of work, but if we go back to really focusing on what the point of using that platform is for, then we can start developing some better bullets and other things. But otherwise, I mean, my entire experience has just been like, oh, they increased the account by this number of followers, and to me that doesn't show a lot of impact, but so far that's kind of what I've been dealing with. So
I think the real value in the insights is the trend, so the change over time. If you can quantify, this person took over on July 1st and our reach was X and our engagement was Y. However, on December 1st, the engagement had increased by, whatever percentage, and showing that and saying, during this period of time that this person was in charge, we increased our engagement. I like engagement more than reach. So you think about it in terms of if you put up a billboard, in front of a gas station that says free hot dog, and everyone that drives by the gas station has been reached by that billboard, but the people that actually pull in and get the free hot dog, that's your engagement. And so you can put stuff up on there, but the people who are actually, liking and commenting, those are the ones that really matter, as opposed to the ones that just scroll past it on the feed. So try not to use reach unless you're using it as part of to show a trend or a change over time, and definitely focus more on how much engagement you're getting compared to the amount of people that are seeing your post. So if you're going to use insights, definitely use use engagement, and then just show how over time it's increased during that person's time as a manager.
But isn't there another portal where we can gather information about how influential our platforms are, or our media, or Facebook versus Twitter versus Instagram? Is there another place other than insights that we can dig for some of these numbers?
I'll jump in right there, because that's more of like an organizational thing with our office, and the quick answer is yes. We actually have a contract with a company called Meltwater, which lets us not only jump into your insights, but also lets you kind of see what words are being associated with you on social media. Not just what pops up in your post, but what's popping up in other people's posts. So you can request that data from us. We can actually plug your platform in on ours, and then set it to auto feed a report to you all the time. So yes, there is a way to do that.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
And then having clear goals too. If you want to reach, the entire state of Texas, for example, then what you can do is you can start to see what cities in Texas you're reaching in that insight. And so, if you look and see that your top 5 cities are, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Austin, and your goal is to reach smaller communities, or you can kind of target areas, then start to figure out what content would be important to that audience, and then see if that changes your top cities. So having there's no easy answer to what's equals success. You just have to figure out what do we want to achieve, and then try to reverse engineer it. How do we what tactics can we actually get to have that measurable success? And so that it is frustrating, because like you said, for promotions and awards, it's really hard to show a commander this is the value this person's adding. So maybe what would probably resonate better is, it may be anecdotal, but if you can show a case study, here was a change in command, and instead of doing it the way we did last, 2 years ago, we did it this way, and we used Instagram stories, and look how many more people looked at it, as opposed to just throwing the pictures up after the event was over. This was specialist blah blah blah, who show them, show your commander the entire planning process, or they may not have enough time. But if you kind of just show them the sausage that was made and show them how much better it was than last year's sausage, they're going to go, oh yeah. And then you can directly point out one of your soldiers and say, they did this. Then they're like, yeah, great, awesome. Let's keep them. And so that's probably one of the best compliments that they can receive is, especially with some of our commanders that may not get it, is, I don't know what you do, I don't know how you do it, but it's working, so keep doing it. And And so that's, anytime you can just show that whatever you're doing is working, they may not care about the process, but they do definitely care about the results.
And while I don't think we'll jump fully into podcasts, I do think that we can kind of hit on the subject a little bit more of, managing our time and like how long those things take. But what would make that type of content break through the noise? Because on a podcast, you have the same challenge that we have in social media.
Yeah.
There's a lot of noise because a lot of people are doing it. So I'm going to kind of take your question. I'm going to kind of tweak it a little bit to make it a little bit so we're not jumping on the podcast rabbit hole too far. But
yeah, so we built a podcast from scratch at the 82nd, and it was our 100th anniversary. We wanted to do like some of the lesser known stories from our 100-year history. So we built this out from scratch, and we made the front page of iTunes, which was really big for us because it like brought in the audience that we originally thought we were going to get. The biggest takeaways I had was develop your content way in advance. Like get 10 episodes in the can before you ever release one. Because what you'll find is as you start doing it, you're like, oh my gosh, this is a lot bigger project than I thought it was. And so if you finish one and post it and you promise them every week, like you're so far behind at that point. And so get basically a full stack of episodes before you ever launch. And then, figure out how you can make it engaging. So we had the luxury of, the brand recognition of the 82nd Airborne. Finding out what it is about your unit or about that topic that you want to talk about that makes it interesting to somebody, and then really leveraging that. So definitely use your social network that you can. If you can get your senior leaders, if you can get government leaders to come and talk about what you're doing and why it's important, then you will find an audience. And so it's so critical to figure out what you do well, who else cares about it, and then trying to get them to come and see. Because if you just like throw something out there into the ether, it's really hard to have a defined audience to get them to come back and engage with you. So if you'd like, we can talk a lot more about if that's something you're very serious, like you
We've
guys are
already got
serious
the
about.
equipment.
Okay, so we can talk a lot more, and I'll kind of share what we learned on that.
Oh yeah, I have no podcast experience. Yeah, nothing to add.
we have another question.
Yeah, Lieutenant Kozlowski with the 56th Infantry Brigade Combat Team, acting PO. One of the things that was brought up in the recent GAR PO discussions on Facebook from larger entity Facebook pages. I saw posted by the 29th Infantry Division Facebook page commenting about cross-posting. Trying to promote cross-posting.
Yes.
Could you kind of dive into that a little bit and pluses and minuses of that?
So remember I talked about the algorithm on Facebook of like how Facebook decides what's important. So one of the things I didn't mention was shares. So when you share a post from another page, it comes up and says, blah, 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 shared a post from blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it looks weird and it's kind of wonky. That's actually relatively low on the hierarchy of content. So cross-posting, what it allows you to do is take a video that another unit has uploaded and post it organically to your page. And so you kind of subvert the look of we shared a video from another page and it looks like you actually created and uploaded the video yourself. And so from an aesthetic standpoint, if you have to cross-post from other pages, like if you are sharing video from other pages, it's going to hurt your ability to reach your audience. And so basically what you do is you go into your page settings and you request permission to cross-post, then you pick up the phone and call the person and say, I just requested permission, can you go in there and approve it? And make sure that the other person approves your request to cross-post. And you do this between all the pages that you have a vested interest in. Basically, pull out your Rolodex and call every single social media manager and get cross-posting rights, because even though they may post a video or videos that are specifically related to their organization, they're going to post something eventually like Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day that everyone can use, or sexual assault awareness or something like that, something that really has a broad reach. And if you are just sharing it as opposed to cross-posting it, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage immediately.
Another question. To strengthen the relationship between the PAO and the commanders, one of the common trends I'm starting to notice is that, yes, there is the unit Facebook page, Facebook for Business page for the unit. There's also the Facebook for Business page for the